Patrick Galloway writes, Chanbara contain universal qualities that appeal to people of any nationality, including honor, loyalty, and bravery. Chanbara, meaning sword fighting, is a subgenre of the Jidaigeki, Japanese period drama. Shozo Makino is considered the father of Japanese cinema, inventing Jidaigeki. The first samurai films were direct adaptations of famous kabuki theater plays. Jidaigeki plays quickly developed into silent samurai films with titles like Orochi, Kurama Tengu, Shukon Gerestu. In the 50s, Akira Kurosawa released Seven Samurai, popularizing the genre and sparking 2 decades of filmmaking in Japan and America. The films often criticized the Bushido, way of the warrior, stemming from the ethical dilemmas in World War II. The decline of the genre started in the 70s, with the popularization of TV, when directors had to battle with TV shows for budget. Manga influenced the genre, as tickets weren't selling, and they knew adaptations would sell tickets, but the genre got significantly more violent. A New Embrace of Bushido, David West says, the younger generation of filmmakers were not impacted by the war, and rather grew up in the economic boom of the 50s and 60s, and were products of the oppressive education system that replaced the more open-minded schooling of the Toshio period. Around the year 2000's Chanbara films re-emerged in Japan and America, with titles like Twilight Samurai, cinematic significance of the films chosen. Seven Samurai, 1954, is one of the most influential films in Japanese cinema, capturing the essence of Bushido while reflecting Japan's post-war transformation, paving the path for Chanbara films. The film presents samurai not as idealized figures, but as honorable warriors struggling to find purpose in a changing society, mirroring Japan's own identity crisis in the wake of World War II. Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill. Volume 1, 2003, is a visually striking and genre-blending film that has left a lasting impact on cinema. It showcases Tarantino's signature style of non-linear storytelling, hyper-stylized violence, and intertextual references. A film that blends homage with innovation, celebrating the legacy of genre cinema. Its impact can still be seen in modern cinema, both in its aesthetic influence and its role in redefining female-led action films. A justification for why these two films is worthy for study, as the films embody the Chanbara genre through different time periods and landscapes, granting views into Western and Eastern culture. Seven Samurai perfected the Chanbara genre, with the historical context of Seven Samurai encompassing 16th century feudal Japan and 1950s post-war Japan, where the film's themes of honor, cooperation, and resilience echoed a society rebuilding itself. Kill Bill Volume 1 is perfect to show the transformation of Chanbara a half-century later, converting many tropes from several Chanbara films and other films of inspiration into a modern masterpiece. Kill Bill Volume 1's social-cultural context reflects early 2000 shifts in gender representation, race consciousness, and cultural hybridity, subverting traditional action tropes through a hyper-stylized, cross-cultural narrative that challenges stereotypes and redefines female agency in cinema. Cultural context of Seven Samurai. Historical cultural context. The film is set in the late 16th century, during the Sengoku, Warring States period, a time of civil unrest in Japan, when warlords and their samurai fought for power. This historical setting allows the film to explore themes of social hierarchy, honor, and duty, particularly as the Bushido. However, Seven Samurai also reflects post-war Japan, 1950s, when the country was grappling with the consequences of World War II. Japan's defeat and subsequent occupation by Allied forces forced a re-evaluation of traditional values, militarism, and the role of honor in society. The film's depiction of samurai as outcasts, no longer serving a defined purpose, mirrors the existential crisis of post-war Japan, as it transitioned from imperial power to a pacifist nation focused on reconstruction. It is crucial to note that Kurosawa is a humanitarian who openly expressed his feelings since his first film, with David Conrad speaking on Kurosawa's main goal was to liberate Japanese society by replacing feudal mores with democratic ones. Note evenpast.org. How the film reflects its cultural background. Seven Samurai reflects Japan's transition from feudal to a modernized post-war society. It critiques the rigid social hierarchy of both feudal and 1950s Japan, where individuals from different societal positions must work together. The film ultimately depends cooperation and sacrifice, emphasizing that survival depends on unity rather than individual heroics, a theme deeply relevant to Akira Kurosawa in Japan's Reconstruction era. Seven Samurai was produced by Toho Studios, one of Japan's leading film production companies, with a budget of 125 million yen, the most expensive film in Japan at the time. Partial to the reason of Kurosawa's want for authenticity, leading him to build the village in Tagata on the Izu Peninsula, Shizuoka. Toho closed production twice during filming, and Kurosawa went fishing both times, saying that they invested too much money to quit now. Despite initial concerns over cost, the film became a massive domestic and international success, setting new standards for Chanbara. How the film reflects its cultural background. Seven Samurai reflects Japan's transition from feudal to a modernized post-war society. It critiques the rigid social hierarchy of both feudal and 1950s Japan, where individuals from different societal positions must now work together. The film ultimately depends cooperation and sacrifice, emphasizing that survival depends on unity rather than individual heroics, a theme deeply relevant to Akira Kurosawa in Japan's Reconstruction era. Cultural context of Kill Bill. Volume 1 encapsulates the early 2000s cultural shift towards more inclusive and hybrid narratives, blending Eastern and Western tropes. The movie reflects a heightened race consciousness through its portrayal of characters like Oren Ishii, whose complex ethnic identity underscores the nuanced discussion of a lack of mixed-race individuals' representation in Hollywood. With Layla Wuzir in an article about mixed-race representation in 1990s Hollywood, and making efforts to produce work that represents me and people like me. I'm hopeful that we can reach a point where we form connections that go beyond what we look like and instead center our shared experiences. Additionally, the film subverts conventional gender roles by centering on a powerful female protagonist whose journey of vengeance redefines notions of agency and strength. Tarantino comments on this in an interview with Jane. Girls will love it because they'll feel empowered by Uma Thurman's character. This melding of diverse cultural influences not only pays homage to classic cinema, but also reimagines these legacies for a modern, global audience, highlighting the era's growing appetite for layered storytelling and cross-cultural dialogue. How the film reflects its cultural background. Kill Bill. Volume 1 reflects its cultural background by drawing deeply on the traditions of Japanese Chanbara cinema, while simultaneously engaging with early 2000s social dynamics. The film revives the samurai ethos through meticulously choreographed swordplay that pays homage to classic Japanese films. At the same time, it mirrors a period marked by evolving ideas about gender and race. The film's central female protagonist subverts traditional gender roles in a genre once dominated by male warriors, and characters like Oren Ishii invite discussions about race identity and representation in Hollywood. Tarantino's stylistic choices, from his narrative structure to his striking visual aesthetics, underscore the era's penchant for blending homage with modern reinterpretation, resulting in a film that both reveres its cinematic heritage and speaks to contemporary cultural sensibilities. Kill Bill. Volume 1 was produced by A Band Apart and The Killer Films, with Lawrence Bender serving as the primary producer, and distributed by Miramax Films. The film was made on a budget of approximately $30 million. Shot in the early 2000s, its production involved international collaborations and a commitment to high production values that helped redefine genre expectations within the Chanbara tradition, with Red Sun being one of the only other films to do this. In 1994, during the production of Pulp Fiction, 1994, Uma Thurman and Tarantino outlined the story of Kill Bill and teamed up in 2000s to bring the story to life. Pulp Fiction references the Deadly Viper Assassination Squad, the antagonist of Kill Bill, during the dinner scene, with fan theories speculating that Kill Bill is a pilot episode for a TV show.
Comparison of the cultural context. The evolution of the Chanbara genre from Seven Samurai to Kill Bill. Volume 1 vividly illustrates how shifting social and historical context shape cinematic storytelling. Tarantino adapts the classic elements of the samurai mythos, such as combat and tropes, but frames them within a contemporary context of modern concerns like gender equality and cultural hybridity. The more traditional Japanese archetype of women being housewives, and in more rural areas, laborers, kuni, is seen. In his great period films, Kurosawa upholds without irony or distance the accepted feudal and samurai view of woman as possession and object. The waves at Genji's door is actually disregarded in Seven Samurai. Samurai with Shino, one of the few female characters in the film. Shino is able to make her own decisions, to the dismay of her father whom cut off her hair, goes out with the youngest samurai. When their relationship is revealed, her father publicly shames her, but in direct contrast to Rikichi's wife, who is given to the bandits, she is still accepted in her community and can be seen thriving at the end of the film. This transformation underscores how the genre has been influenced by its cultural surroundings. While Seven Samurai is a product of Japan's feudal past, and Kill Bill still reflect the respective problems of their time and highlight Chambra's evolution as a genre. Giri vs. Ninjo. Real samurai were guided by the principles of Bushido and Confucian ethics, which give rise to the classic Giri vs. Ninjo, a tension between duty and personal emotion. This internal conflict is exemplified by Kanbei in Seven Samurai, whose decision to help the villagers embodies the struggle between social obligation, Giri, and concern of self-preservation, Ninjo. In contrast, modern-most Chambra have largely shifted away from this introspective dilemma. The paradox could be seen in World War II, where kamikaze pilots grappled with the same paradox. They felt a deep duty to honor their country, yet were painfully aware of the ultimate sacrifice. Similarly, the bride's eventual decision to abandon her assassin life and embrace motherhood signifies a modern reinterpretation of Giri vs. Ninjo, as she seeks personal redemption and a future beyond the endless cycle of violence in the second film. Mise en scene. The metaphoric elements include the excessive use of wind, rain, snow, fire, blood, bright/dim lighting, and shadows, to name a few. Midnight Eye in Seven Samurai. Akira Kurosawa uses natural lighting and high-contrast black and white cinematography, common at the time, to emphasize the realism and grit of feudal Japan. The lighting choices heighten the dramatic tension, particularly during rain-soaked battle sequences, where the light and shadow accentuates movement and chaos. In contrast, Kill Bill, Volume 1 embraces a highly stylized approach to lighting, using stark black silhouettes in the fight with the Crazy 88, inspired by Samurai Fiction's opening sequence. Tarantino also employs black and white lighting because of the sheer amount of fake blood, with 450 gallons being used, IMDb, and in homage to the genre's roots, representing the shift of a more grounded beginning to the over-exaggeration of Chambra. Expanding on the blood. In Seven Samurai, violence is depicted in a way that unglorifies bloodshed, emphasizing Kurosawa's themes of unity and reflects the atrocities of World War II, with Common Sense Media. Worth noting, the violence isn't particularly bloody, but does include characters getting stabbed and shot. Common Sense Media. Or, this restrained portrayal contrasts sharply with the later evolution of the genre. By the 1970s, Canberra films and television shows, influenced in part by Hong Kong action such as Street Fighter, began to popularize more overt, stylized depictions of violence. Akira Kurosawa's own Sanjuro, 1962, even contributed to this trend by popularizing the blood geyser trope, an effect from an on-set malfunction. Unlike Seven Samurai, violence is at the core of Kill Bill. Despite that the year 2000 marked the lowest volume of violent crimes since 1985, FBI. The gore can be attributed to Tarantino's highly stylized direction, which can be seen in Pulp Fiction, 1994, when probed about his film's violent nature he responded with, because it's so much fun, Jane. Cinematography. Traditional Canberra shot types, as seen in Seven Samurai, were heavily influenced by classical painting and kabuki theater. Wide shots to establish landscape and isolation, Sword of Doom final battle. Medium shots for duels, Sanjuro duel. Extreme close-ups to demonstrate tension, fear, or determination, Harakiri. Seven Samurai employs long, wide, and deep focus shots that immerse viewers in the expansive, realistic landscape of feudal Japan. Kurosawa's static compositions and fluid, measured camera movements allow multiple layers of action to coexist in the frame, emphasizing group dynamics, social hierarchies, and the communal struggle of his characters. One way Kurosawa deploys these themes is by shooting the town as a whole, instead of individual villagers. In contrast, Kill Bill, Volume 1 captivates the bride alone, capturing the move for independence in late 90s America, which can be seen in movements like the 1998 Economic Human Rights Campaign, where people are argued for more economical and social dependency. Influence watch. Or, Kill Bill also reflects a significant evolution in cinematographic style by using a mix of extreme close-ups, mid-shots, and kinetic tracking shots. Filmmakers in the 1980s and 1990s, particularly in Hong Kong martial arts cinema, began experimenting with these shots that heighten the immediacy and visceral impact of combat. Tarantino's approach creates a heightened visual impact, intense close-ups that capture the emotional intensity and physicality of the characters, and dramatic zooms that transform traditional sword fights into almost surreal spectacles. Editing. The following list includes technical attributes that do occur in both Jidaigeki and Chambra, but are more prevalent in the Chambra movie. These include hyper-real sound effects, intertitles, slow/fast motion, Midnight Eye. In Seven Samurai, Kurosawa employs classical continuity editing, using long takes, match-on action cuts, and deliberate pacing to maintain realism. One of the only few instances of slow motion we see in Seven Samurai is when the first death occurs in the film, with Kurosawa wanting to emphasize the consequence of battle. Kurosawa used multiple cameras with telephoto lenses to capture action sequences from different angles, a technique that has since become a staple in action filmmaking. He believed the intensity of battle could only be captured once, and aimed to put the audience right in the middle of it, ensuring a dynamic and immersive experience, with one of the cameras tracking the death in action reinforcing the tragedy of war. By contrast, Kill Bill, Volume 1 embraces rapid cuts, jump cuts, slow motion, and abrupt transitions that heighten intensity. Influenced by Shogun Assassin, 1980, and Hong Kong martial arts films, Tarantino uses stylized match-on action editing, sudden freeze frames, and rhythmic cutting to create a hyperkinetic, almost surreal combat experience. The inordinate sound effects Tarantino employs throughout the film stylize, while paying tribute to what inspired the film, such as the siren sound, which is the Ironside theme by Quincy Jones, also featured in Five Fingers of Death. The rapidness of the editing mirrors the rapidly changing society observed in the 90s with Encyclopedia.com, remembering the 1990s as a decade of extremes and contradictions, with Americans buying in large, working long hours, and going in debt, showing the hecticness of society. Narrative. Similar to Kabuki Play, Seven Samurai follows a classical linear narrative, unfolding in a three-act structure: the samurai's recruitment, their preparation, and the climactic battle against the bandits. Kurosawa's storytelling is methodical, allowing the audience to deeply engage with character development and the gradual build-up of tension. In contrast, Kill Bill, Volume 1 employs a fragmented, non-linear narrative, jumping between different timelines and perspectives. Inspired by films like Rashomon, 1950, by Kurosawa, Tarantino structures the story episodically, often revealing key events out of chronological order. The film's use of abrupt chapter breaks and shifting perspectives aligns with early 2000s postmodern storytelling, where audience familiarity with genre tropes allowed for more playful, self-referential narrative structures. It's important to note that Kill Bill broke away from the main genre Jidaigeki to base this Chambra in the modern world. Midnight Eye lists two of the three staple plots of Chambra films being a revenge and a group samurai film. Kill Bill, having the central plot and motif central around revenge, features an intertitle card at the beginning of the film. Revenge is a dish best served cold, meaning to get revenge in time, so the viewer could fully understand the extent of her determination and plotting to get revenge. Cynthia Kirkup. Multiple times throughout the film, the viewer questions the morality of the bride's decisions. When the bride murders Vernita in front of her daughter or torturing Sophie. This can be best summarized by Tarantino during an interview for the movie. Revenge is messy. It never works out the way you want it to. Seven Samurai, exemplifying the latter. The film's narrative is built around a band of warriors who set aside personal ambition to unite in defense of a vulnerable community, accentuating the film's main theme of unity. Midnight Eye, this type of story, by and large, ends in a showdown of some type, typically between our protagonist and a swordsman of near equal talent. The final fight of Kill Bill is a reference to Lady Snowblood. The fight is close with the bride prevailing. Seven Samurai showdown between Kikuchiyo and the bandit leader is brutal, with both killing each other off. The fight demonstrates Kikuchiyo's transformation. Comparing Seven Samurai and Kill Bill, Volume 1 reveals how cultural context shapes storytelling in Chambra films. Seven Samurai uses a linear, group-oriented narrative to reflect post-war Japan's emphasis on duty, honor, and collective sacrifice, rooted in traditional ethics. In contrast, Kill Bill adopts a non-linear, revenge story that mirrors modern ideals. This evolution demonstrates how shifting historical and social landscapes inspire filmmakers to reinvent narrative and stylistic approaches, ultimately revealing the dynamic transformation of the Chambra genre over time.